Our services sector, which is 60%
Right.
or so of the Indian economy, is doing extremely well. Public investment in a lot of public investment areas then keeps the economy growing. Foreign direct investment is coming in. Manufacturing improving but still patchy. You have to
Right.
keep your fingers crossed. Agriculture was extremely challenging, almost in a distressed situation in the last 2 years because of bad monsoon. And I think this year, as I look ahead, if the monsoons are what the Met Department predicts they would be, in addition to an increased urban demand, you will have rural demand.
Right.
And once there is rural demand, I think India's private sector also has something to look forward to, which obviously also means that manufacturing will grow because that has a spiral effect on it.
Right. While much has been done in the last 2 years, bankruptcy bill has been cleared in the last parliament session. Aadhaar has been given a nod by the parliament. But what is in the bucket list for the government going ahead in the next 3 years?
Well, I think I still have my hands full in terms of structural reforms that we require. And I've always said that as far as reforms are concerned, India will never have a finishing line. So you'll have to go on and on with the change situation. For instance, if I think loudly, I'm looking at the direct tax reforms to bring down the taxation rate.
Right.
I'm looking at an indirect tax reform, the GST, which is, I think, extremely critical. I'm looking at changing the Companies Act, where the bill is in before Parliament. I'm looking at a further investment in forestation through the Campa law. The bill is before Parliament. I'm looking at further strengthening the banks in addition to the bankruptcy code through the securitization and the DRT law amendments. Now, these are the legislative steps. As far as administratively it is concerned, I think in various areas, social areas, education, healthcare, there's a lot more to look forward to. If you ask me what is one of my topmost priorities in the field of education, you have a serious challenge in medical education.
Right.
You have awfully low number of seats. So when the government is talking of reform process, I think that's a critical reform areas. How do we suddenly give a boost to the number of medical seats in India, increase the number of doctors in India so that healthcare standards itself improves. And there is something that I've been in touch with the health ministry that they are looking at. Additionally, I think the three critical areas of future will be to continue the spend on infrastructure.
Right.
So this will be remembered as the age in Indian history where infrastructure grew by leaps and bounds. Modern railway stations, modern trains, better air services, more electricity than what we require, bigger highways, rural roads, toilets, more ports. Now these are all areas of infrastructure where we are actually galloping ahead. I think rural India has to get the largest size of the pie. They've been neglected the most, and therefore the maximum resources must go there. And through various instrumentalities, we must use it for funding in those areas. And I think this whole series of steps we've taken now has to become bigger leaps as far as social security is concerned. Any developed economy in the world can't be without a social security package. So far, people have not even spoken about it in India. And I think this is the first government which is taking steps in that direction, and that will have to consolidate over the next 3 years.
Right. Infrastructure, social security, a whole host of structural steps that the government is looking at, but many say this is not going to be possible if we do not have a good macroeconomic situation. Let me come back to that point again, because at this point of time, many say if crude continues to be at this level, at around $50 a barrel, we may not have the kind of benefit that we had earlier in terms of inflation, in terms of our current account deficit. Do you share that concern?
Well, obviously, higher crude prices is not good news for India. But I think if it remains within a range,
right,
as it is at present, it's something that we can handle. If it goes beyond the range, then certainly it creates an adversity. We'll have to deal with that situation if it arises.
Right. One more question, sir, because this push to infrastructure that you're talking about can only happen if the health of the Indian banking system is good. But at this point of time, one of the critical issues that the banking sector is dealing with is with regard to NPA. And according to our own ministry, we have gross NPAs of around 6 lakh crore, which is a huge number. The market and the rating agencies, in a way, are not really convinced about the fact that whether worst is over for the Indian banking system. Can you explain where do things really stand at this point of time?
I think these are not loans recently given. These are old loans. These relate to sectors which have been under stress. Those sectoral problems have been addressed significantly. In many of those sectors, the balance sheet has started changing. And therefore, slowly it must relate to the banks itself and reflect on their balance sheets. Additionally, the banks have to be empowered. The bankruptcy law is one empowerment. The SDR mechanism of the Reserve Bank is an empowerment. What we are doing to several other recovery proceedings laws, the securitization or DRT itself is an empowerment. And therefore, you can't indefinitely have a situation where people who owe money sleep well and the bankers have to worry. I think the people who owe these monies also will now have to act.
Right. But also help me understand, at this point of time, when we've seen many of the PSU banks, banks like SBI, banks like PNB, posting huge losses because of the change in norms.
Look at the balance sheets of these banks. PNB operationally has had a huge profit. SBI has had a good profit. It's the provisioning which makes it look like a loss. The NPA was always there. Whether you keep it below the carpet or you bring it to the balance sheet. Right. And I think a transparent balance sheet is the best way of doing business. And that's what the banks are today doing. Operationally, they are all making. The PNB, for instance, last year made a 12,000 crore operational profit, which is not a low level of profit itself. But because it had to provision for losses, for the NPAs, right, it declared a loss. So it is a balance sheet provisioning which has led to that situation.
But also, sir, do you see that pain to ease at some point of time going forward?
Well, it would, because once the problem climaxes and those sectoral results change, I think the situation would alter.
But, sir, let me quote one of the reports that were written by Reed. They are saying that the sheer number of skeletons tumbling out of the bank's closet these days suggests that taxpayers will soon be presented with a huge bill to go forward and pay. And at a time, when we're talking about bank recapitalization, how much more can we see that?
Let me first of all clear the misapprehension. All these NPAs are not bank frauds. There may be some improper loans, but there is a large volume of these loans which are business losses, right, or on account of sectoral losses. The loans were rightly given, those sectors haven't done well. And therefore, to say that these are all skeletons tumbling out, a business loss is not a skeleton. A skeleton is something which is done as a scam or a scandal. Right. And therefore, we must be careful to distinguish between chalk and cheese as far as the banking NPAs are concerned.
So, as far as the recapitalization is concerned, we've
Well, I am very clear. The government will fully strengthen the banks and fully support the banks to the extent that it's needed.
Is there a figure that we are looking at?
Well, I have declared a figure in the budget, but I am willing to look at a higher figure also if it's necessary.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.